This is the story of how I escaped Bolivia as a Latter-day Saint missionary in the midst of the 2019 political crisis and civil unrest. To give you some context, I want to briefly explain the climate leading up to these events. For years, Bolivia had been polarized. Supporters of former President Evo Morales and his movement for socialism clashed with opposition groups, accusing him of authoritarianism and corruption. In 2019, Morales declared himself the winner of the presidential election, a declaration that ignited mass protests when leader Carlos Mesa and other citizens decried the vote as rigged. The situation intensified after the Organization of American States released a damning report citing significant election irregularities, lending weight to the opposition's claims. Protests soon turned violent, with clashes between Morales supporters and opponents and between the police and demonstrators. The military was also deployed to quell the protests, resulting in further violence and unrest. At the time, I was working in an isolated town along the Bolivian-Argentinian border called Villazón. As I talked with other missionaries and observed the escalating tensions, I wrote in my journal, "Protesters have been blockading the main streets of most cities for the past few weeks, preventing anyone from coming or going, including food and supply trucks. Huge fights have been breaking out in all major cities, and most missionaries have been instructed to stay indoors and only leave the house when necessary and only in street clothes without plaques." Most missionaries thought we would be able to wait things out and return to normal missionary life again. However, things really escalated when former President Evo Morales resigned and fled to Mexico, and Jeanine Áñez took over as interim president. Morales blamed this loss on the United States, which publicly supported the new president. This sparked anger towards the US and Americans in Bolivia. This surge in anti-American sentiment, along with the expulsion of US diplomats by the Bolivian government, prompted the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to pull the American missionaries out of the mission. Most of the missionaries were serving in the Cochabamba area, which had a large airport. This made it easy for the church to get the majority of the missionaries out the same day the decision to evacuate was made. I was among several missionaries in extremely isolated areas that did not have such easy airport access. On top of the protests and unrest taking place, the majority of the main highways through the country were blockaded, making travel extremely difficult or impossible in some cases. I met up with two other American missionaries in Tupiza, where our zone leaders instructed us to head to Sucre, which had an airport. Although we knew there were many blockades along the way, this was considered the best option at the time. We took a taxi from Tupiza to Potosi, and the journey went smoothly due to the remote location and minimal traffic. Upon arriving in Potosi, we stopped at a bus terminal to inquire about roadblocks in Betanzos, a small town along the way to Sucre. When we learned that blockades were indeed present, we instructed a new taxi driver to take us as close to them as possible. We were erroneously informed that we could pass through the barricades on foot and find another taxi on the other side. So we pushed forward, hauling our heavy luggage through the blockades. As we pressed forward, we encountered and pushed past multiple roadblocks, each spaced about a quarter mile apart. However, around the 5-mile mark, we faced several serious complications. First, we discovered that a key bridge halfway between Betanzos and Sucre was completely blockaded and impassable, shattering any hope of finding a taxi anywhere between the two cities. Second, we didn't have a cell phone and were unable to call for help. Third, one of the other missionaries' suitcase's wheels broke, making it difficult to move his belongings. Fourth, and most concerning, the protesters manning the blockades were becoming increasingly agitated with anyone attempting to pass. At this point, we realized we couldn't move forward, nor could we go back. The repeated roadblocks and distant impassable bridge made reaching Sucre impossible. It also became clear that backtracking through the blockades we'd already passed was not a safe option due to the increasingly aggressive protesters. We later learned that several people had been violently killed the day before for attempting exactly what we were doing. Knowing we were in serious trouble, but not knowing what to do, we decided to kneel down on the side of the road and pray to God to help us get back to Potosi, where I had previously served and knew members who could help us. We felt prompted to wait there. The main road was totally blocked off by the blockades, but there were backcountry dirt roads that connected to the main road, allowing the occasional vehicle to pass. After about 30 minutes, a man with a big trophy, think old as dirt 15-passenger van, approached us, and after we explained our predicament, offered to help. We told him that we really needed to get back to Betanzos, where we could catch a bus back to Potosi. He had a big rack on top of the trophy that would have easily held all our suitcases. However, he told us he didn't want people to see that he was helping move a bunch of gringos and their stuff past the blockades. So we packed all our stuff into the vehicle, practically filling it from floor to ceiling. We navigated remote routes circling around the town, but each time we encountered a manned blockade, we had to turn back and venture further into the desert before trying another approach. Eventually, we were practically off-roading as we made our way towards Betanzos. At one point, our path was blocked by small boulders, and we offered to move them, but the man insisted on doing it himself while we remained hidden in the car. He didn't want anyone to see that he was helping luggage-laden Americans circumvent the blockades. Later, a group of people spotted us in the car and began yelling at the man for taking gringos past the blockades. He yelled back and quickly sped off. We spent hours bypassing highway roadblocks by off-roading through the backcountry. After many tense moments, we finally made it back to Betanzos, and then took a bus to Potosi. Reflecting on this experience, I wrote, "It really was a miracle that we made it out of that situation safely." The man who picked us up was a direct answer to our prayers and really stuck his neck out for us. It felt like God reached in with his hand and pulled us out of that dangerous situation. It strengthened my belief that God is watching over and protecting me. In Potosi, we joined other missionaries whom the church had not yet been able to evacuate. The city had been a hotspot for violence and protests, and the toll it was taking on the city was evident. The streets were littered with burnt tires and scattered rubble that underscored the tangible impact of the unrest. A team in Salt Lake was assembled to figure out how to evacuate the 12 stranded missionaries from the country. They devised various plans, but complications kept arising. Initially, they considered sending us with a local member who claimed to know a crazy back road route to Sucre, but our mission president deemed it too risky. Attention was then turned to Uyuni, a small town with an airport about 4 hours from Potosi in the opposite direction of Sucre. However, the commercial flights from Uyuni only went to La Paz, which was a hotspot for violence and anti-American sentiment. In the past, 2 LDS missionaries had been violently killed in La Paz, leading the church to implement a policy prohibiting American missionaries from being sent there. To avoid La Paz, the church chartered a plane from Argentina to pick us up in Uyuni and fly us directly to Santa Cruz. On Tuesday morning, we received a call telling us to take a bus to Uyuni and to only bring 1 suitcase and 1 carry-on, as the plane wouldn't have enough space to carry all of our luggage. Because of this, I had to leave about half my stuff in Potosi. We arrived at the airport in Uyuni, but the charter plane didn't show up. Apparently at the last second, the Bolivian government refused authorization for the plane to enter the country. We were stranded once again, and were told to spend the night in the Uyuni chapel and wait for a new plan. The chapel was an old mud house that served as the meeting house for the Uyuni branch. On Wednesday morning, our mission president called to say that we would have to fly commercially and risk going through La Paz. When we landed in La Paz, the man the church hired to help keep us safe warned us that we needed to get back through security as quickly as possible, as he didn't believe we were safe outside the security checkpoint, even within the airport. The road outside the airport was completely blockaded with protests all around. We had an uneventful layover in La Paz, and then flew to Santa Cruz that evening. We met the mission president of the Santa Cruz mission at the airport and were taken to a hotel. Unfortunately, there was a protest happening in Colombia at the time, which had closed the Bogota airport, which meant that we couldn't fly directly to our reassigned missions. While we waited for things to calm down in Colombia, we were sent on splits with the missionaries in Santa Cruz. Some of the highlights from those few days included walking through a torrential rainstorm with water up to our knees, experiencing 100-degree weather with 80% humidity, and attending a local state conference on Sunday. Sunday evening, we received word that things had calmed down in Colombia, and we were going to the airport that evening at 10:30 to fly through the night to Bogota. I ended up spending about 2 weeks in the Bogota MTC as I waited for my Colombian visa. And then I went to my new mission assignment and continued my missionary service in a new country. Looking back on this experience, I know without a doubt that God is real. His hand was present in every step of our journey, guiding us through the chaos, softening hearts, protecting us in the face of danger, and providing help when we needed it most. I have seen firsthand that he is a God of miracles, always aware of our struggles and ready to answer our prayers. I know that he watches over us, and he listens to our pleas, and he strengthens our faith through trials. I know that Jesus Christ is our Savior, and through him we can find peace even in the midst of turmoil. As we trust in him and follow the promptings of the Spirit, we will always be led to safety. I am grateful for the gospel of Jesus Christ in my life and for the assurance it brings that I am never alone, no matter how far from home I may be.